Laura Prada, and in this opportunity we'll be talking to Teri Mattson, who is coordinator of the campaign to end the U.S. and Canada sanctions against Venezuela, and who is heading a delegation that visits Venezuela in these days. Welcome, Teri.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
Yes, the same. In what ways this campaign to end the U.S. and Canada sanctions against Venezuela comes when you think there's the need of a campaign?
Well, we brought with us 14 people from four different countries, Costa Rica, United States, Canada, and Turkey. And we all came to see what's actually happening on the ground in Venezuela for ourselves without the filter of U.S. or Western mainstream media. We are all very much aware of the dialogue being created in our countries as to what we are to see and hear. And we've all traveled Latin America fairly extensively, and we know there are other perspectives that need to be witnessed and shared. So we are not here to particularly define any political agenda, with the exception of returning to our own countries and influencing our own government and educating our own people as to our experience here.
But this campaign, what is its mission?
So the campaign was actually created last summer of 2018, and it is the result of two smaller delegations that were here in May to witness the presidential elections on May 20. And I brought, through my other project, I manage the Intrepid News Fund, a group of 11 journalists down to Progressive News, because we were all aware that the U.S. mainstream media would have a very specific dialogue relative to May 20th of last year. So we came down as 11 journalists to witness what was happening. We did have some access to polling centers, credentials to polling centers, to talk to people, to actually witness the technological aspect of voting here. And it is far superior than anything any of us have ever used voting back home in the U.S. or Canada. So we were able to witness that and to talk to people, and produced 14 news stories while we were here. So simultaneously here on the ground, we were able to get the news into alternative press back home, which was the objective of that particular delegation. In turn, so we were 11, and because we were smaller and independent, there were occasions where we were partnered for specific meetings to create a larger audience. We were partnered with a smaller labor delegation out of Canada. And so we created the two delegations, 18 or 20 of us. And we all worked together very well, the two delegations. And at the end of our tours, their group leader, Raul Burbano from Common Frontiers in Toronto, he and I were talking what's the best thing our delegations could possibly bring home after the elections in May. What can we ask our delegates to do, and what can we bring to our fellow citizens? And he and I thought, we really have to work against lifting the sanctions. That is everything. I mean, our feeling was it's an artificially created humanitarian crisis to an extensive degree, and that people don't really understand. And I can't speak towards Canada specifically, but I can say, just through my own personal experience as a U.S. citizen and having lived through multiple military actions over the course of my lifetime, that what I see is that people in the States do not particularly understand what sanctions, or as some of the human rights organizations here prefer to say, unilateral coercive measures, and I think that's a more exacting phrase. I think in the U.S. we tend to think we're not dropping bombs on Venezuela. We don't have boots on the ground, so to speak, in Venezuela. How bad can the sanctions be? They're pretty bad. And that's what led to creating this delegation, to come and see for ourselves.
And what have you seen so far? Now, compare what you saw last year.
Well, I would say last year, May of last year was the first time I had been to Venezuela since November of 16. And I could tell immediately, driving from the airport into downtown, wow, the sanctions had really accelerated It was obvious that, this inability to repatriate foreign profits, to restructure your foreign debt, for the government to have any funds to do anything. It was pretty obvious to me, that there's not much money to sustain the parks, there's not much money to sustain public transportation or buy access to buy tires.
But everything is working.
Everything is working, but with difficulty. I mean, and you can just see it's really, really amazing to me how all of you navigate your day so successfully with all the impediments thrown at you. And that is something people don't understand at home. You're still getting through your day. And there are, just exchanging money, or for me trying to book a hotel and all the different loopholes and changing the currency and putting the currency on a debit card, and you can only put some, but you're all doing it. And you're doing it quite calmly. It's impressive. And that is not understood at home. And even when you're when I first arrived here a couple weeks ago now, I stayed in a community that is in the hills, that's mixed community, Chavista and opposition, not hard opposition, but moderate opposition, mixed political community. When the electricity went out, I wasn't sure what to expect. Everybody came together. Who needs water? Who needs help with their kids? What should we do with this food?
Everybody was helping each other.
It was really a really pleasant thing to see. And there is no understanding of that cooperation. In the Western media, it's very much painted as you have this one side against the other, and there's not a lot of discourse about all the other perspectives in between.
What do you think those perspectives in between are shut down?
What the perspectives are in between?
Those perspectives in between, those shades that you can.
They're really positive, actually. They're very positive. And it's the one word that keeps coming up is dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. We want dialogue. We're willing to talk. And that's great. It's also very clear to us, at least the experiences we have had thus far, that this is not a country looking to fight its own countrymen. There's no desire for a civil war here. I also think one of the biggest things that's happened, probably by default, is that the rhetoric coming out of Washington, D.C. has made all of you more Venezuelan. You've retouched your roots and your citizenship and with one another. It's really clear you're Venezuelans first, and you're very proud of that. And people, even at the very grassroots community level, have a very, very sophisticated understanding of U.S. foreign policy and of the current geopolitique on the planet. That's very different from what Washington talks about.
Talking about the sanctions and the economic impact that it has done in Venezuela, why is also the economical crisis called world attention, specifically here?
Why is Venezuela like the flashpoint right now?
Yes, exactly. Why is Venezuela now in the center of all the questions, all the eye of the hurricane, of the economical crisis, when the world is also on economical crisis?
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, it's the curse of an oil nation. But you don't just have oil here. You have diamonds, you have gold, you have high-tech minerals here, and you're a very large country geographically with an enormous amount of natural resources of varying types, and there's a lot of transnational corporations that would like access to it. And that's very clear. John Bolton made that very clear on CNN. There's just it was very clear it's about the oil, and there's U.S. corporations, transnational corporations that are waiting to develop the oil fields, and that this is good for the U.S. economy. So at least there's no window dressing on it any longer, right? And it's very clear what the objectives are. It's also, I feel, and that there's this shift on the globe as far as globalization and the economy and national sovereignty and all those issues that I would say since the 1990s, but you can correct me on this, that really you've seen the rise of China, Russia, India, what we would know as the BRICS, nations that really were created after Wall Street damaged the global economy in 2008. There was this need to create some sort of alternative financial system, and the rise of those BRICS countries, alternative form of finance, and the growth of their economies has really already has the world in a multipolar, multilateral situation. We're already there. And I'm not sure that people in Washington, D.C. know that, and if they do know it, they don't like it. And the objective is to maintain a U.S. modeled unilateral world. And my feeling is too late for that. I mean, we've been in a multilateral world for 2 decades, as far as my perspective is concerned. And it is impossible. My fear is, it's impossible to ask those countries to go back to where they came from. You're not going to put, as we would say in the States, you're not going to put Jack back into the box, or the genie back into the bottle. And my fear is, and I really would share this to the U.S. citizens, that our military is going to be used to attempt to do that, to squash these emerging countries and maintain some sort of U.S. unilateral model economically, governmentally, and politically and militarily. And that's scary for the whole planet. And I'm not sure people in the United States understand that that's a real possibility. I think many people, specifically here in Venezuela, but many people across the planet do see it that way.
Why those emerging economies, as they also are being called, represent a threat if they are working for the people? Is working for the people a crime?
Well, it is if you're doing it without privatizing the economy. I mean, in our model, everything's being pushed to privatization. You can see how our Congress financially starves almost all public services, public infrastructure, healthcare, education. None of that is, it's increasingly less and less funded with public money. When I was a young person, the taxation in the United States was very high. And that money was used to provide roads, to provide a very, very successful public education system. But the access to that public education system had an economic and racial component to it. I benefited from it. Some of my friends, my adult friends of color, raised during the same era, did not benefit from it. But nevertheless, the taxes were there for infrastructure, education, arts. We don't have that anymore. It's all been, suffocated or cut off. My opinion of that is that it's being starved financially so that it's privatized, much like we're seeing in Honduras. This real push to private, neo-capitalist version of privatization. And I've been to Honduras many times, and all that has done is create more poverty and massive migration, which we don't. And here's the one thing I would like to share with people in the Northern Hemisphere. Having been to both countries multiple times, Honduras and here, how this is framed in the United States. The people from Central America, specifically Honduras, are considered illegal migrants. The people fleeing Venezuela, or migrating from Venezuela, are considered political refugees. Why is that? The government in Honduras is a U.S. coup-installed government. They're illegal immigrants. You have a president elected by your people, and your migrants are considered political refugees. And I just think if people in the U.S. can understand what that paradigm is, you'd much better understand most of Latin America.
For 60 years, that chart's been hanging on Cuban's neck also.
Exactly. Yeah. And look where they are. They're still moving along, beautiful people, keep finding, new solutions and new international relationships, which the U.S. has chosen to not be part of. And so there's this whole, it's very hard. I just wish everybody in the United States had a passport and an airline ticket to come here, Cuba to Nicaragua. Because my feeling is the only people on the planet who do not understand what is happening, this new global politique, if you want to call it, the only people who don't understand what's happening in the international perspective are people within the U.S. borders. Pretty much everybody else really sees the new international structure. It's very exciting, particularly young people.
We have to keep working then.
Yeah.
Another question about those emergency economies. For example, in the region we have Brazil, who is also a member of the BRICS, but they've just signed an alliance with the United States, and is part, even though it's part of those emergency economies that have been working for the people, for providing them, now they signed this alliance with the United States, and to attack also Venezuela, a country that has been working for the people, that all the resources it has, the government has put it in function of helping the people. Is United States threatened, might feel threatened by an already emerging economy like Brazil, already being there close to them, and having Venezuela putting all on the ground to also be part of one of those emerging economies?
Well, I think it's interesting you bring up, we're talking about BRICS and Brazil, because, the objective here may be to get rid of the B in BRICS, right? And perhaps the R as well. But the C in BRICS is never going to go away.
No.
There is an attempt to get rid of the R in BRICS as well. And definitely the soft coup in Brazil.
It has always been an objective of the United States to get rid of the R.
Competing international economic structure, to get rid of it, right? And it's not going to go away. I think what we've seen in Brazil, this you want to call it a soft coup, a legislative coup, judicial coup, that was the attempt, was to get them back to a pure U.S. model, neoliberal capitalist model, and get the B out of BRICS. And it's just, there was an interesting, I think I was here March of last year, I think, when our former Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, was visiting Latin America. And I remember the day he left Peru, and I'm sorry, but I forget the Peruvian foreign minister's name. But the day Tillerson left Peru, the Peruvian foreign minister had a press conference and thanked the U.S. for visiting, and that yes, there's a relationship there to be respected and worked with, but he also reinforced the fact that China is Peru's largest trading partner. So here is that multilateral perspective, right? And he made it very clear. We are in the hemisphere of the Americas. The United States is our neighbor. We have similar, a good relationship, but we're not giving up our economic trading partner in China. And I thought that got very little coverage in the U.S. I heard it, I was here in Latin America that day when that press conference occurred, and that to me was just so, just kind of encapsulated exactly this whole, Peru's already in a multilateral relationship, and they're not gonna, they want to make their own choices. And I think that's one of the things that, probably the most important thing with our campaign, is to show the need to respect, honor, and preserve Venezuela's national sovereignty, but also your natural resource sovereignty. And, your foreign minister gives a very good talk on natural resource sovereignty. He has a very good talk on that, and it really is a great summary of the history of the Americas over the past 500 years, because it's always been about that exploitation,
Though governments and countries like Nicaragua, like Venezuela, like Cuba, are here in Latin America, in the southern hemisphere, why emerging economies are a threat to the United States is because they are on the south, because countries like China, like in Africa, like Angola, Namibia, they represent a threat to the northern hemisphere. Why is that south why has that south always represent a threat to United States and to the northern hemisphere?
Well, the South is rich in a lot of natural resources that the northern economies need and want access to and control. This is a big question. So there's a number of directions to go with that. I mean, I guess I would start with always, specifically in Latin America and the Caribbean, the last 500 years has been settlements and exploitation of natural resources and cheap human resources. I mean, you've been under the Empire of Spain, and then the British banks, and now under the United States. Mm-hmm. And the United States has a real vision, and not all of us, but we do learn about the Monroe Doctrine in our history classes growing up, and the current administration is quite overt that that is what this is about, and that there is to be no other foreign intervention militarily or economically in the hemisphere of the Americas. So again, I think we're coming back to this unilateral view of how this hemisphere and perhaps the world is supposed to look versus a multilateral, multipolar view that already exists and has existed for quite a long time. It's interesting to see in the news, and seeing a little bit of the news from the States since I've been here, but from you here at Telesur and other resources, that the United States is now very concerned that there is Russian military here in Venezuela. But imagine how the Russians feel having U.S. troops on its border, more U.S. troops on its border today since World War II. Imagine how the Russians feel about that. We don't talk about that at home. Where's our military and what they're doing? Why is it so horrible that the Russians are here? They're allied with Venezuela. They've got significant foreign investment of their own in this country. Why is it wrong for them to be here working with you, preserving their investments? Clearly they are, and which is fine. It's what the U.S. military is used to protect U.S. foreign investment. They're here protecting that. They're giving you humanitarian aid, true humanitarian aid. Medicines, food, technological assistance, things that you need to help your people and keep your communities running. So they're doing some good things here, but it's not what Washington wants to see.
Thank you, Teri,
very much. Thank you. It's so nice to meet you. Thank you for having me here this morning.
No, thank you. Like this, we've come to the end of this from Caracas. In this opportunity, we spoke to Teri Mattson, who is coordinator of the campaign to end the U.S. and Canada's sanctions against Venezuela, and who's been here in these days in Venezuela, heading a delegation and living the situations here in Venezuela, living Venezuela's reality. With this invitation, with this talk, we say goodbye to you.